these are the foundation, right? These are the things that you got to get in play, because you could have the world's best financial plan. You could be worth millions of dollars. You miss one of these things, one lawsuit goes wrong, all gone in a snap.
Welcome to the Physician Sense Podcast, a podcast designed specifically for physicians, offering a breakdown of complex financial topics to help you develop your financial IQ, further your financial journey, and improve your well-being. Whether you're a medical student, resident, fellow, or attending physician, you're sure to learn something new that will benefit your journey. And now your hosts, Chubb and Tyler Olson.
And welcome back to this episode of Physician Sense. I'm your co-host, Tyler Olson, and I am joined by my Sunshine State, energized, friendly friend, and excellent certified financial planner, Chubb. Good to see you, Chad.
Tyler, always a pleasure. Feels good to just have you and I on the screen for once again. Feels like we've had so many wonderful guests. Now it's just like the good old days. Just you and I gone off into venture into a fun topic today. So always good to see you. Excited to get into another good one today.
Yeah, me too. And today, I love that we're going to be talking about asset protection in a way that's very digestible for most people. Because I'd say the majority of us, when we hear asset protection, we immediately think complexity. And that can be true, but in today's episode, we're going to be identifying just a few simple steps that you can implement to protect your assets. Doesn't require a tremendous amount of knowledge or complex strategy. Just a few things to get started. And there are other things in that world of asset protection that we could talk about another time that would be more complex. We'd probably bring an attorney in on such a discussion, don't you think?
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll have that topic soon with an attorney where we can go more like the trust side of things and the more complex side of asset protection. But, as you beautifully stated there, for the bulk of us, especially early in the game, there's some low-hanging fruit that should really do a fantastic job giving you a lot of good protection.
Yeah, and there were 4 of them. Can you name them off for us?
Yeah, so we're going to go through, here's our 4 for today. We're going to do ERISA. And if ERISA sounds like a crazy word to you, just think of it as this. These are the protections that are inside of your 401k, 403b, so type your qualified accounts. We're going to do umbrella insurance. I hope many of you have heard that term, but if this is a new one, this is really good asset protection. And I used to say it was really good bang for your buck, but the rates have actually gone up quite a bit, but we'll get into that. One of my favorites is this simple asset title called Tenants by the Entirety, but Tyler and I will nerd out. There's some, the main thing is, does your state offer it? And then, unfortunately, a lot of people end up missing it because that's not the default. If you just go open up a joint account at a Vanguard or Fidelity, it won't default to that. And that's when you got to keep an eye on. And then Tyler, one of my favorite topics, date nights. Because as I always joke, you want to know how you're going to lose half your assets? It's not a crazy malpractice case. It's a divorce. So keep the fire going. So we're going to get into date nights. Maybe we'll talk date night secrets. Ooh. So we'll get into that. Those are the 4 that we're going to get into.
That'll be fun.
And by secrets, I mean, what do we do with our spouses to keep the dates going? Don't take it the wrong. We're not going to get too crazy here. This is a PG podcast. We got to make sure we always get the clean rating out there. So just referring to what Tyler and I do with our spouses to keep those fun date nights going. So maybe we'll add some notes in there for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but yeah, let's start with ERISA first. So if you're in training or if you're out of training, in all likelihood, being a physician, you have access to a qualified retirement plan, and so therefore, the assets that you contribute and that are contributed for you into these plans, they have ERISA protection. And this has to do with protection from creditors. This has protection to do from professional and personal liability. If you have assets in these accounts, they cannot be readily accessed in case of legal, civil action, or something of that nature. So like you were telling me earlier about the IRAs, this is why planners like Chad and myself, one of the reasons why we prioritize keeping your assets in the 401k or 403b level. in a practical sense, when you're in training, you're in residency, fellowship, attending hood, people often ask, they're like, what should I do with my old retirement accounts? A common default is to roll those old retirement plan assets into a rollover IRA. And it's usually not the best advice because it loses that ERISA protection. And that's not to mention the fact that it hobbles the backdoor Roth strategy, which if you've not listened to our episode on the backdoor Roth, you should do so. But having assets in a rollover IRA mitigates that strategy that's good for many physicians. But on this topic of asset protection, if you put your 401k into a rollover IRA, now you've lost that protection. You gotta keep it at that level. I like to keep them. I think of them as like tiers. Like you got the 401k and the 403b that's up high, and then if you dive down to go into a rollover IRA, you're still investing, and there's still tax, income tax deferral protections, but as far as asset protection from liabilities, you've lost it.
It's just the simplest, cheapest, most efficient form of asset protection. Clearly, we're talking to the physician community, but this applies to everybody, right? If your brother's a teacher, your sister's a nurse, like this applies to everyone because this isn't medical malpractice as much as you go get in a fender bender. Those assets are very well protected. Literally, again, coming back to date nights, like the only thing that can get through those is really getting into divorce, right? And you get into something called a quadro. Those are really the only things that can pierce through that. Besides that, they're very, very safeguarded accounts. And this is also where, Tyler, I'm always, well, we may have said this in another episode, but like I always get a chuckle when someone has a whole life policy and they're like, oh, my agent said that, this is the best asset protection out there. And then we look up their state's rules and they actually offer no protection on the cash value in the life insurance plan. And that's just one example. But this is another great topic because you got to look at your state's rules, whether it's 401k, 403b, which again, pretty much ironclad, but Roth IRAs have different rules. HSAs have different rules. 529 plans have different rules. Cash value life insurance, annuities. This is where going through your state's rules and knowing, hey, what's good asset? And even coming into like states like Florida, where like you have unlimited homestead exemption. So you have really good protection in the equity in your home, where some states don't have good protection. So while this topic, we want to keep it to, we're in the ERISA topic, knowing your state's rules are so important for asset protection. And again, you probably have higher odds, I'm sure we could find the stats for this, of a bad fender bender going horribly wrong as opposed to a medical malpractice case. But this is where asset protection 101, keeping it simple, you can be very effective here. If you're sitting there and you have all your assets in a 401k, 403b, heaven forbid anything goes wrong for you, you should be in a pretty good spot there. And that's what ERISA can do and really safeguarding those assets for you and can keeping it simple.
So within the confines of a financial planning process, it often makes sense to prioritize these types of accounts anyway from an investment planning and retirement planning and tax planning standpoint. So all the more reason to prioritize these. Max out the 403b or 401k, and you'll benefit in other ways too. But as far as protecting your assets, it's just another reason to do so. Now, the second reason. What was the second reason? I'm blanking.
Well, hold on. I have a pop quiz for you.
Oh no! All right.
Only because I had to look it up, so I didn't know this going to.
All right, I'm ready.
When you get so used to saying like ERISA, do you know what ERISA stands for? Do you know the words behind the acronym?
Oh my goodness. I remember I had to memorize it back, when I went and took the Series 7.
So I won't put you through any more pain. Employee Retirement Income Security Act. I'm so used to calling it ERISA that, and it's been around since 1974. A fun fact out there, because I wanted to say it while we were talking. I was like, I knew employee, and then I couldn't get the rest of it. So I figured I'd at least throw a fun pop quiz in there for you.
Employee Retirement
Income Security Act.
Security Act. Yeah.
1974.
Yeah. AKA your retirement planning, you're on your own, buddy.
Yeah.
Bye-bye pension.
And then the second part of the pop quiz was the next topic, which is umbrella insurance. I know you were going there before I cut you off with ERISA.
Yeah. No, I I'm really excited to talk about date night. I think that's why I'm blanking out on number 3 and 3.
Just skipping 2 and 3. We're actually just going to go right to date nights.
That's right. Yeah, let's just talk about date ideas. But no, umbrella insurance, that is, that's a word that many of you have probably heard. It essentially is a way to increase personal liability coverage that layers on top of your car insurance and your homeowners or renters insurance policies. Because homeowners insurance and renter policies and auto policies, they have maximums that I think that they're like 300,000. I think some states maybe allow 500,000. It depends on some factors, but for those of you that are in medicine, you've got that DO or that MD at the end of your name. Someone can easily find out that you're a physician. And obviously, if you're a physician, you're wealthy and you have got lots of money, right? Now, we all know within our community here that is not the case, especially for those of you early in your career. But the part of this that really matters is that if you are responsible or if you are suspected of being responsible for some injury of some kind, and somebody decides that they aren't going to just take the check that the car insurance company offers, they can easily find out that you're a doctor, and that might compel them even more so to like hire an attorney and look for ways to get more money out of you. And so umbrella insurance is super, super important for physicians to get because it makes sure that you're not just stopped at $500,000 of coverage. You can get, and often we recommend $2, $3, $4 million in additional coverage to go on top of it. And it's not expensive. I mean, it's gotten more expensive. And when you said it was expensive, I know like there's people in Florida, many people in Florida have told me, they're like, I looked into it and it's like a lot more money than you told me it was going to be. I wonder if it's because of the hurricanes. Is that part of the reason why?
Yeah, I think it's hurricanes. We also have really, what I've been told, so personal story, our rates from the second year that we lived here, the third year, went up 70% on our umbrella policy. So when we first got here, we were paying about $250 for about $1 million of coverage. And now I think we're right around $600 for $1 million of coverage. And then to add context to it, when we lived in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, we paid around $200 for about $1 million of coverage. So when I talked to our agent, they chalked it up more to driving, which actually makes sense. It probably has nothing to do with hurricanes, at least in terms of the general aspect of what umbrella covers.
Right, yeah.
But I'm sure there's like, hey, we got to make more money somewhere because we're losing our butts on hurricanes. And they even said that the wildfires could end up affecting rates for everyone because of them claiming, in other areas. So I think there's a lot of things that go into it. But from what I was told, it's more of a driving thing than it is like natural disasters in Florida.
Yeah, right. Yeah, of course that makes sense. Yeah. So did you cancel the policy because now it's $600?
No.
Just
no. My wife's a crazy driver, so I'm just trying to. No, I'm just kidding. She's not. She's a very good driver. Fun little fact. Actually, I was going to throw my kids in there, but my kids are only 7, 5, and 2. But here's a fun little fact: if you're sitting there and you have a child that's 15 years old and they're about to turn 16, get as much umbrella insurance as you can right now, because when your child turns 16, there is a high probability that they will not give you umbrella policy or they will not allow you to increase it. So fun little factor. Actually, one of my clients told me that when we first moved to Florida about 4 years ago now, but I thought that was really interesting. And it makes a lot of sense, but I never heard it in play until my client told me that. So fun little fact. And if you're sitting there thinking like, how are they going to know I'm a doctor? When a client signs up on our portal and all they give us is their name, I can pretty much find out where they went to residency, fellowship, they're triple board certified. I probably know their dog's name. I know their spouse's name, probably know where their kids go to school. Like in a quick Google search, you would be amazed. I always call this my soccer flop, but when they find out you're a physician, the probability of a lawsuit goes up significantly. Unfortunately, again, our community, we know that you have an extra target on your back because all of you are worth millions. If not, you're probably all billionaires by now, at least according to the general public. So it is good coverage to get. And as you noted there, Tyler, like even with our rates going up quite a bit, I wouldn't label this cheap per se, but for $1 million of coverage, even in a higher cost state like a Florida, that's still worth the cost of admission. I mean, I think that's a fair value. And again, I think that's Florida, but when we were in Philly, it wasn't nearly that costly. So I think it depends on really some of those underlying limits on the insurance policies and then what the driving records look like. While we're in a younger demographic of Tampa, there's still a little bit older population down here in the state of Florida. So I think that drives the rates up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So get your umbrella insurance, and your financial planner should absolutely be talking to you about this. So,
Good question for you too. I had one more. How do you ultimately? I'm a new client working with you. What do you usually use as your guide rail on how much a family needs of umbrella protection?
so bare minimum is $1 million. That would be per person, even if it's not a 2-physician family. If the spouse is liable for something, and they can find out that the spouse's husband or wife is a physician, then that there's the risk right there.
Oh.
So $1 million, absolutely. And what we do is we actually ratchet up the amount that they are, the amount of coverage based on their net worth increase. So that's actually a coverage that we will increase as they get older. If they have like property and they have kids, then I tend to highly recommend 2 million or more. And if there's like a dual income, then I recommend 3 million. And then as their assets grow, and they actually, their net worth is actually growing to like 4, 5, 6 million. If it gets up that high, then we increase coverage commensurately.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
Yeah, very similar actually. We use net worth as our indicator. Usually minimums, like where we'll always start. I actually think a lot. I don't know. I don't even know the smallest amount you can get. Yeah, it might be $1 million, it might be 500,000, but we always start at $1 million. And then same thing when net worth goes through a threshold. So let's just say their net worth went through 3 million. We'll then say round up to 4 million because again, pretty low cost. Going up an extra $1 million, you're going to grow into that. It's fine.
Yeah,
and we don't get fancy with the math. Like we're not going to say, well, of that 4 million. 2 million's in 403Bs or 401k, so it's technically safeguarded. We're just overly protective on it because, again, say it's $300 for $1 million of coverage. For the income that most of you are making, that is well worth the cost of admission. So very similar. We use that net worth number and kind of grow with it. That's one we keep an eye on, annually at review meetings. But yeah, very, very similar to what you all are doing.
Yeah. So just make sure this is implemented. I know we've talked about a lot of the details here, and we want you to know the reasons why. The functionality of doing it is pretty simple.
Yeah.
So this is an easy step to protect your assets.
Yeah. Sometimes you end up getting a little discount too, because if you throw in another line of business, let's say you already have homeowners and car insurance, you add another line in there, you might even get a little bit of a discount on everything by adding that umbrella policy. So just a good one to get in place, low-hanging fruit. I remember the CFP, when I sat for the CFP, they just started like beating this into our heads, umbrella insurance. And I was like, what is this umbrella insurance? And now we tell everyone like, there's not a client that doesn't have it. Like that's how important we believe the umbrella insurance is.
Yep. Now let's talk about probably the most complex topic of today. We're going to be talking about the option of tenancy by the entirety. Chad, what is tenancy by entirety?
Yeah. And as we say, complicated. The good news is complicated based on what we're going to talk about for the other 3 topics, but in reality, not complicated at all for really any of you to put in play. So tenants by the entirety is just an account title that you can use, but here's where it gets tricky. Only 18 states allow it on investment accounts. 7 allow it on property. And you're probably thinking, what are those states? Stay tuned. Coming up a little bit later in this episode, likely in a few minutes. But with that, here's the kicker. You can only do it with your spouse, right? You can't have these accounts with your brother, your mom, your dad, sister-in-law, right? It's only with your spouse. So that's another unique part of it. But simple account title, and you have asset protection, because what the theory is that if I get into a car accident, I'm responsible for it. They can't come after that account because my wife is equally the owner to that account. So they can't take the account from me because she owns as much of it as I do. Compared to where traditionally, if you go say, hey, Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, I'm going to open up a joint account, they usually default to something called joint with rights of survivorship. That's usually what you'll see there. does not offer that same form of protection. Now, joint with rights of survivorship, you can actually open that with anyone per se, but you don't get that same protection as you do by tenants by the entirety. And I don't know about you, Tyler, but we have had some pretty high net worth individuals come work with us, and they still had joint with rights of survivorship. And it always just kind of gives me a little bit of a chill on how much, because taxable brokerage accounts, joint accounts, are really a sitting duck for most of you if you don't have them in the proper account in this example, or again, we're not going to get into trust planning today, but in some form of a trust, that is a sitting duck. It's pretty much essentially just cash sitting there. So that's why this account title is so important. And again, we've seen, if you're just getting started, usually we're the ones, hey, use this account title, so it's okay. But the amount of individuals that have come to us with, a couple $1 million in a brokerage account, joint brokerage account, and it's just missing this one simple switch is still a little bit mind-boggling to me. So hopefully this episode will spread some news out there too, and more can just make an easy switch here. But what are you seeing on the ground for these types of accounts?
So interestingly, even though we're not talking about trust work today, trust decisions are affected by this decision. Like I've had people who they had a trust written, a revocable trust. And to be honest, for all that the revocable trust, that has nothing to do with protecting your assets while you are alive. That is very much a protecting your heirs, upon your death sort of a tool. But nevertheless, like people will qualify it as a sort of way to protect assets in anticipation of death. But it's a bit of front running because, for example, you don't want to put your home, if you have the option, you don't want to put your home in a trust, because that can, especially if you are in one of these states that allows you to designate your real estate property as tenancy by the entirety, because those will be incongruent. So you really need to pay attention to the trust decisions that you ultimately make. But for the sake of simplicity today, assuming that you've not done any trust work yet, and you haven't done something as substantial as putting your home into under the ownership of your revocable trust, and you would definitely know it if you did that. We'll just say that by default with property that you own, like a real estate property that you own, and investment property to the degree that your state allows it, you should default to tenancy by the entirety. I've seen it where, particularly with physician families where there is more than one, that's something that's of great concern, because you're both in the situation where you're high visibility in terms of liabilities. And you want to make sure that your home and potentially your joint investment account is protected from each other's activities, perceived liabilities. The world that we live in is it's not designed to presume innocence and to presume that everything is protected unless there's an overwhelming amount of evidence. Somebody can make trouble fairly easily, and this is a really easy step for those of you in these states to take.
I was going to say, and the states are, drum roll.
Yeah, go ahead.
I got to make sure I got all my state 2-letter abbreviations correct here. Okay. So first 18 I'm going to read. These cover real property and personal property. So think of this as it covers both your home and investment accounts. That's important because the last 7 are only real property. So these 18 states, you get the best of both worlds. All right. So you got Alaska, Arkansas, Delaware, District of Columbia, Florida, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Missouri, New Jersey, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Vermont, Virginia, Wyoming. Best of both worlds. These next 7, only real property. So think of this as your home, but not your investment accounts. Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, New York, North Carolina, Oregon. Those are only states. Just about half the states have some form of protection in there. If you're not in one of those, You miss out on both sides of it. But a pretty good list. But if you live in one of those 18 states, this is an account, or whether it's your investment account or your home should be covered. And if you're in one of the other 7 states, your home should certainly be covered in there. And it's one of those topics too, Tyler, where sometimes I get nervous that we don't see it a lot. I feel like attorneys usually aren't like pushing stuff, but this is where when a client lives in one of these states, but then they still have their home in a trust, I was like, was that overkill? I mean, and again, every situation's unique. But that's one where if you're in these states, you have a good option, both personal and real, or maybe just real, to have really good asset protection in place without getting crazy. No crazy trust here. Just pretty easy to implement.
Yeah. So I think that covers that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take care of this, folks. It's important. It's super boring, but it won't be boring if something happens. And that's the kind of excitement you don't want to have. So gotta take care.
This is also the topic, textbook, proactive, not reactive. You can't go get in a car accident and then start moving stuff into your joint account, your tenants by the entirety, I should say, or, getting everything back into the 401k plan. They track these things. They'll find those. You can't go buy the umbrella policy after your dog has already bit the neighbor, right? Those are things you got to keep an eye on. And speaking of proactive, keeping the fire going, date nights. I know we joke about this, but I will say I put this in every presentation. Anytime I do public speaking, we do a little asset protection 101, very similar to what we're covering here. I always note the importance of date nights because in all reality, while I hope these rates continue to decline, divorce is very relevant and very common, unfortunately. I think it's still around 50%, somewhere around there, here in the States. So if you want to really protect your assets, make sure that you and your spouse and significant other are putting the time and effort into you and your relationship as well, because that is the quickest way to lose your assets. And we all know someone in our circle, right, where they've gone through this. So take away the assets, all the other effects that come with going through a divorce. Clearly we're referring to the asset side, but there's mental aspects that come with that, and a whole host of other things. But what's your best tips here, Tyler, on date night?
Well, first of all, admittedly, I understand the pragmatic application of this area because it is an impact. There is the financial impact of divorce. When I imagine like what other people have gone through, the financial ramifications, they're just like getting kicked when you're already down. So it is incredibly difficult. And there's like, obviously every family and every person's life and circumstances vary widely. But being able to cultivate the non-financial health of your life, if you're married, is so important. And like, I think to myself, there's such a big difference between like, being married, just the two of you, and then being married and having kids. And I know many of you who listen, like you don't have kids, so this part may not be relatable to you. But as a father, I can tell you, man, like the kids that come into our life, they're awesome, like they're amazing, and like you want to just spend so much time with them. It is easy to neglect the relationship that existed before, and so setting aside time, and I think it's important to not set expectations of like opulence and it's far better to do something consistent and that the other person really values on a consistent basis rather than like the annual big hurrah, let's go on an anniversary trip kind of a thing. Like I know like my wife, she loves to forage for mushrooms. The best thing in the world that I can do is to protect some time where we can go find a forest that she hasn't been able to explore yet. That is like the best sort of an opportunity for her to do something of interest for her. And we get to spend time together and we love being outside. So you have to identify something that is workable, that is like achievable on a what do you call it? Not just a regular basis, but a frequent basis. and that it's something that you recognize is of interest to the other person. That to me is the recipe for success in this regard. How about you?
Yeah, that's well said. And I think it's really important. Like this does not have to be, hey, we're doing, a trip to Bali every year for our anniversary, right? I think the most powerful form of this is the little dates, right? Hey, I forget who said this. Hey, let's wake up 10 minutes earlier every day before the kids are up. We're just going to have our morning coffee together. Hey, let's do, we'll meet at the cafeteria. Let's get lunch together, right? Little things like that. Sure. I hope you get on a cool fancy date night. I hope you get to do cool anniversary trips. I love all that. But I think just the power of those moments of just you two having a conversation is really what's important. One of my other jokes is always, you think the babysitter's expensive, wait till you see how expensive the divorce bill is. So pay for the babysitter when you can as well. Make sure that you are taking some time for each other. And again, finding out what your spouse really enjoys. Again, for my wife, she really enjoys fitness classes. So like one thing I always try to get at least once per month is we just do like a fun workout class together. Maybe it's a Barry's, maybe it's, one of our gyms. But that's her love language. So I know that that's something we can do. And again, it's nothing crazy, right? We go do that for an hour. And I chuckle when you say like relationships pre-kids, relationships post-kids. Pre-kids, I never had to pre-plan date nights. Now with 3 boys under the age of 7, I plan out my date nights an entire year in advance. So it does change quite a bit. But I think, with kids, it's even more important because you can get so distracted. You can get so lost in just the day-to-day of got to go to school. We got this practice. We also want to just play in the backyard or run through the forest. Like by the time you get through all that, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. We should probably also make sure that we have conversations and keep our flame going because, while we never want to think of this as parents, but, eventually the kids are going to leave the house and you still got to make sure that you guys have a powerful relationship to enjoy the kids out of the house and then grandbabies and great grandbabies and all the fun stuff that comes with that. So, it's one of those topics where I joke about in my presentations, but so many important things from the date night side of things and investing in your relationship, right? Whether we call it date nights, date mornings, looking for mushrooms in the forest, whatever you're going to call it. It's an investment in you and your family and your relationship.
Yeah, no, well said. Well, I say this is a good summary of or a good end to like some 4 simple topics. Remember, ERISA, max out your retirement accounts, get that umbrella insurance. If you're in one of those fortunate states that Chad mentioned for real estate or for your personal property, like your taxable investment accounts, choose Tenancy by the entirety for ownership status and maintain. For those of you that are married, for those of us that are married, maintaining our relationship with our spouse, and all these things help to protect the kind of not just the money that we have, the money that we've saved, but also the kind of life that we want to lead, which is the whole point.
Beautifully said. I just thinking you and I, we invest in our relationship too. We get on here, a couple times per month, and we spend time just together, just you and I. So, Physician Sense is thriving now because of our date nights, Tyler. So that's special. Even my significant other, my work boo, that's you, Mark. That's you. So no, well said. Nailed the 4. Fun topic. Again, like you said, not the sexiest topic per se, but these are the foundation, right? These are the things that you got to get in play because you could have the world's best financial plan. You could be worth millions of dollars. You miss one of these things, one lawsuit goes wrong, all gone in a snap. So fun topic, important topic. And again, low hanging fruit. Most of you guys can get these in play here without thinking too much about it. So, as always, my friend, great episode. I'll catch you on the next one.
Sounds good. See ya.
See ya.
This information is for general purposes only. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific professional, financial, or tax advice, as individual concerns vary. Please see a financial professional, CPA, and/or an attorney in regards to your own individual situation. Wealth Heals Advisory Services and Financial Planning offered through Vicus Capital, Inc., a federally registered investment advisor. Olson Consulting, LLC, offering advisory services and financial planning, is a state-registered investment advisor.